Okay, today we got a Honda set of CB900 F2 Bol'Dor carbs. I've already taken one apart, which is part of a time-lapse video, and sort of just unbolted the fuel pump, if you will. It's sort of a vacuum generated by the engine, sucks here and allows fuel to be pumped into the carbs. A lot of times these can be faulty, and you can actually just eliminate them altogether and use a gravity-fed petcock off your tank. So we'll talk about that option with the customer. I just wanted to break these carbs down. They're going to look really familiar if you've ever worked on a 1980s Honda. So I've done cylinder one for a time lapse, and I thought, well, maybe I should stop and explain this to you guys because they're pretty rare machines, the 900 Bol'Dor. Not sure if I'm saying that right, but they don't come across easy. So I've already broken these loose with my JIS screwdrivers. If you haven't done a carb job before, chances are your carbs are Japanese, and they use a special type of Phillips head known as JIS, Japanese Imperial or Industrial Standard. And when I recommend the Vessel, this is my favorite one because it's got a hard to hit and serrated edges as well. The other good one are these impacts where when you hit it, it actually is on a cam and it turns 15 degrees. If you get a real tight one, you can whack it and it's an actual impact driver. These are just really robust screwdrivers, and I don't ever strip bolts on motorcycles anymore as long as they're Japanese. So with this number 4 cylinder, I'm actually going to have to remove the fuel delivery pipe. I've gone through a lot of sort of lubricant on this so far already, just trying to keep the hoses, even though I'll probably replace some of them, trying to keep them intact as much as possible. And if you'll notice, I've got sort of cylinder 1, 2, 3. Oh, I just realized you guys can't even see what the hell I'm doing. Sorry about that. Oh, just to get back at it, this is the fuel pump. I've been going at this number 4 here. Let's get that bracket out of the way. These just slide up. I do like these 80s Hondas because they use metal diaphragm seals. You're not looking, so all these gaps here, we got to keep them clean, but you don't have rubber diaphragms to go bad, which is great because when they go bad with Yamahas and whatnot, usually you've got to cut the retainer ring because they were never meant to be replaced, just the rubber. They made you buy the whole slide, which was a bummer. Now this is sort of what does the sealing, and you'll notice there's a recess to it, and the recess always points up on these. So don't go and put it in backwards, upside down. You won't get a great lift on your slide when the airbox generates vacuum. Now there's this little black piece of plastic, which there's a great guide for CX500 carbs called Larry's Carb Guide. It covers carburetors that are exactly like this, just for a CX500. And he recommends you pull this plastic. It's basically just a blocker from what I can tell. I don't think any of the ports are connected in there, but it needs to sit flush on the bottom. I know there's not a good amount of light there, but so he's even talked about, pull it off, make sure it's straight, maybe hit it with some fine sandpaper. just to make sure it's even down in there. So while I'm doing this, I'm exposing all the air and fuel ports and whatnot. And you'll notice I take the tops off first. I do that because these needles are very fragile, so I don't want them. If I hadn't taken that out and now I go to pull the bowl off, it wouldn't have been pretty, because now I've got a needle sticking out just a touch. Maybe not, it might not stick all the way through, but just a good idea to pull the tops first. And if I was smart, I would have drained these before pulling them off, but it's too boring, so I'm gonna drain them now. This also lets me know if this plug works or not. Sometimes there's an O-ring, sometimes there's not. Alright, so I've got nothing coming out of the tube and nothing coming out in general. Let's see. Yeah, that carb was empty to begin with, and actually the O-ring looks good. The first carb that I took apart already looks like somebody at some points put jets in it, or had it cleaned, or it's just in really good shape, but usually they're clogged up, and I couldn't find the main or the middle jet clogged up. So again, you can hear the click. That's my screwdrivers doing their job, breaking these seized screws. If you ever get a really troublesome one, don't force it. Sit it in the hot bath, because if you followed my advice, you would already own the the eBay 35 liter. It's like 400 bucks, 300 bucks, I can't remember, but it's the only ultrasonic worth a damn. Don't waste your time on anything smaller, even if you're going to be doing small jobs, because it gets up to temp, and its intensity of the sound waves is remarkably more effective than any other ultrasonic cleaner, and pays for itself really in one use. You notice I'm having to tap these. That's because these have not been apart for a very long time. So we'll see if I need new gaskets or not. I'm just gonna pop that end up and let the bolts fall in there. You can see all the ethanol that's dry. It looks like somebody's probably put RTV sealant on there at some point. The bowl's not as dirty as cylinder 1. If anybody wants to take a guess as to why that is, I can tell you it has something to do with where the kickstand is located and the way the bike leans over time. All right, so now I've got my bowl exposed. Let's get this out of the way. Set the camera up so you guys get a good view. Let's see if I can go just a little bit further. So you've got your float, which I love these pins because they don't hammer in and hammer out. They just slide in and slide out. And when I pull this, I'm going to keep the float needle attached. I always like to inspect it. It looks brand new. Like I said, I think I didn't get this information handed to me from the owner, but it looks like, I mean, if you look at these, it's even got the Keihin logo, so they've either bought an official rebuild kit or they've really been taken care of. But yeah, somebody's been in here. And the sizes I'm getting for my main is 98 is what I had on the first one. Over here I've got 98, and I believe I had 68 for the middle jet. I call it the middle because what's under here, this rubber plunger, is very important. If you throw those out, you're going to have fuel trying to get sucked right up through your slow jet. Now these are non-removable, meaning you can't remove them with a tool. If you do need to remove them, you can drill and tap it with an M3, and sort of you drill it, you tap it with an M3 or an M4, and then you get a bolt with the washer, let the washer slide down, and you tighten the bolt, and it pulls the jet up because they are pressed in. after the ultrasonic bath, I'll blow compressed air through and check that. If it needs to be pulled, I can pull it and reuse it. That does control your idle circuit. Now I'm using a screwdriver. This is another Vessel one. These are for like when you work on cars and your hands get oily. But you can see anytime I use a flathead screwdriver in carbs, they're always ground down, custom fit, so that they fit almost perfect in those jaws, if you can see that. And for this one, I'm not even going to use the flathead because it's got the emulsion tube has a 7mm hex on it. There's no point in me pulling that main jet when I can see through it clear as day, which I can on this, but I will go through and poke all those holes through to get that surface corrosion. A lot of this is just dried up fuel. I didn't even try to start the bike on its own. Customer wanted me to do the carbs, so that's where we'll start, and at least we can eliminate that. Now while we're here, let's just inspect the fuel mixture setting. Now because it's on, these carbs are upside down, but this is actually the engine side, this is the airbox side. So whether it's a dirt bike or a road bike, whenever the mixture screw is on the bottom, sometimes they're not on the bottom, but usually they're on the bottom and they're on the engine side in between the carb body and the engine. That is dictating how much fuel is allowed in at idle. And it allows you to adjust it based on elevation, temperature, whatever. You know, they are very hard to get to. There's a special tool I use that's a long screwdriver that has a 90-degree at the end, so you can get to them with them still on the bike, because you kind of got to tune them in with the bike. So what I want to do is just take a benchmark and count how many turns out from full closed AM. So there's half a turn, 1 turn. I'm expecting between 1.5 to 3 turns. 1.5, 2, 2.5. No, hell no, I got this all wrong. We'll go back. 1.5, 1, okay. 1.5, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4 is where that number 4 is at. So they would have been, the looser this screw is, the more fuel is allowed at idle. So they would have had it set up to be a little bit rich at idle, which is fine. I prefer rich over lean, mostly because it helps keep the temperature just slightly lower than normal. And what you're going to find in here is, this is the main screw, and you want to make sure that that tip is very nice and straight. Also, what you're going to find in here is a spring. I can use the magnet on one of these. And the trickiest parts to get out are, after that, is usually a flat washer and an O-ring with these Hondas. I can see that I'm moving the flat washer. And a lot of times what you do here is you know, if you don't have a rebuild kit, I usually do not buy a rebuild kit to begin with until I open it up, because sometimes like this, there's really not much wrong going on. So what I tend to do, leave a comment below if you think this is a bad practice. I would like some insight. You know, I'm self-taught just since I was a kid, and you know, learning from mistakes. That's usually the best way to learn. But one of the mistakes I make is pulling these, getting the spring out, and I can't get the O-ring, and I say to hell with it. Throw it in the ultrasonic. Then when I pull it out of the ultrasonic, I go digging in the bottom of the ultrasonic cleaner for the small O-ring. Can't find it, but it's also not in the carb. So I kind of leave these in there just to collect that. And then when I'm done with the bath, I'll pull that out and blow it with compressed air. As well as every other passageway including these side air. Gosh, I can't remember the name of this. What this does is when you generate enough vacuum, it sucks the air sucks this diaphragm in shut to allow more or less air at higher speeds. Sometimes you'll see something that looks real similar, and it's called an accelerator pump. And what those do is when you twist the throttle, it shoots fuel right into the valves. So take note, that little orifice there goes into that little ring, and you can see we've got a ring and we've got what I'll call a diaphragm. I'm gonna set that there. Now say this was stuck and it didn't want to go, I wouldn't force it, because the damage I would cause is not worth getting it out. And I'm looking at this, I don't actually see, I see a tiny, tiny little tear from a pinch. They always have 4 pinches. So I'll hold it up to the light and I'll look through it and I'll see a pinch. And I use a special adhesive for these rubbers that's, geez, that's gross, which doesn't, it's not affected by fuel. The solvent's pretty good. And it's important to know when you put these back in, that the fat side goes there and the thin side goes there. Now that O-ring is so easy to lose, so just be careful. I know I look like I'm just sort of chucking them in there all lackadaisical, but I'm not. I know exactly what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a while, so excuse the brevity. You can see just this real nasty goop. It's very interesting to me. So even while the jets look clean, whoever did those new jets, they didn't pull apart these airlock pumps. So I'll go ahead and disassemble this to get to all those, because there's no way to get to them otherwise. And what we've got now is the jets are pulled. I don't see any air jets that are removable here on the front. Sometimes there's one there that you can remove if you want. And even my float needle seats, they look pretty new, so somebody's definitely been in here. I'll update you once I go chuck it in the bath. Cheers.